I want to start my talk by asking you, the audience, which one of you had a hot drink this morning? Either a cup of tea or a coffee, or used another kind of means of making a hot drink. Please put your hand up now. Quite a few of you. Thank you so much. I'm also going to ask you another question, and this is a little bit more personal, so don't feel obliged that you have to put your hand up. Did any of you have to think how much making that cup of coffee or tea might cost you in your energy bill? Have a think about that. Because in the last few years, we have seen an energy crisis in the UK, and our bills have gone up. Everyone has noticed it. Whether you can afford your bill or not, you've certainly heard about it in the news. It's been front page news in all of our newspapers in the last few years. And our energy bills actually, on average, are still about £400 more than they were about 3 years ago. So it's a real issue. And I want to tell you the story of Joe, who is one of our research participants. And I interviewed him a couple of years ago for one of our research projects, where we looked at, as part of the Sussex Energy Group at University of Sussex, whether we actually want to find out how people actually use energy. So we went around and spoke to people like Joe. And I interviewed him, and he told me that for 6 years, he didn't use the heating at home because he was so worried about his energy bill. He couldn't afford to do a hot meal. He wasn't cooking anything at home. He wasn't making any hot drinks. And he told me that he was literally kept alive by a charity that brought him sandwiches. And Joe is not alone. In the UK, we have about 6 million households. That's 6 million. That's the same amount of households that a small country, for example, might have. I come from a country of Finland, and the population is 5.5 million. That's the whole of the population. But in the UK, there are 6 million households who cannot afford to heat their homes, to cook meals, to basically pay for their energy bills. So they live in fuel poverty. And that means that they basically have quite a lot of dire experiences in their daily lives. Because if you live in fuel poverty like Joe, it affects your mental health, it affects your physical health. Particularly, it affects children who might not have a warm space at home to do their homework in. They might go to school, for example, smelling of damp because the home is so cold and damp. And for that reason, children might get picked up on. So while we have a lot of people that cannot afford their energy bills, we also have a huge number of people who can. And people like myself, I can make a cup of tea, I can make multiple cups of tea a day and not really think about whether I can afford my energy bill. But I do think about those cups of tea because it's consuming energy. And we consume too much energy in many cases. So we have this excess consumption, and it's partly because of our lifestyles. And they have changed a lot in the last few years. So for example, in 1970, people had an average 17 appliances in their home. If you think now, for example, how many electrical appliances you have in your living room, in your kitchen, in your bedroom, even in your bathroom, even though it's dangerous to have electricity and water mixed up, and particularly in your teenagers' bedrooms. Anybody with a teenager will find out, there will be more than just a smartphone in there. So our lifestyles have really, really changed, and we are consuming a lot more energy in the way that we heat our homes, the way we travel, the kind of diets that we have, what we basically eat, and what we can consume in our daily lives. And I think it's really important that we make the link between energy, emissions, and climate change. And I'm sure everyone in the audience have heard about, climate change. It's happening. It's here. We are feeling it. Some other countries are being far more worse affected, but already in the UK, we are also feeling the effects of climate change. And it's not going to go away. Just by ignoring climate change, it's not going to go away. We need to do something about it. And we have actually legal targets that by 2050, we have to have a net zero society. Presently, about 40% of our emissions come from households. So that's me, you, everybody in the audience. We all consume energy that creates emissions, particularly if it comes from fossil fuels and other polluting sources. So we need to do something about this. And in the Energy Demand Research Centre that I direct for the University of Sussex, we are building on previous research which has shown that we actually have a real opportunity here. In the UK, we could reduce energy demand by 52%. That's by half. That's a big figure. 50% is, it's a big figure for somebody who does research. But we need to figure out how can we get there. And that will require a mixture of measures. It'll require a societal shift so that we can actually start talking about energy in the way of that, we can't just keep consuming the way we do going forward. We need to think about our diets. We need to think about our home energy consumption. We need to think about transport. So the way we eat, the way we travel, the way we heat our homes. But also this needs to be going across the whole of society. So we need a whole systems change in this. And it's really, really important that we do this fairly. So when we are talking about people like Joe, for example, it's really important that when we are looking at our net zero transition, that we do it in a fair and sustainable and just way, so that people like Joe can actually have a sufficient amount of energy services in the home, so that they can have a hot meal, so that we don't have children who can't do their homework because the home is too cold, for example. So we have to make sure that people who are in energy poverty or fuel poverty can actually have sufficient level of energy services. But at the same time, we really need to also encourage those that might be consuming too much to actually start thinking about how can I bring my consumption down? How can I make sure that the energy that I use is actually sustainable? And is there some way that I can reduce what I'm about to do in my daily life, for example? So we do think at the University of Sussex, particularly in the Energy Demand Research Centre, that it is possible to reduce energy demand. And I mentioned this requires a whole systems change. So it means that we have to consider industry, buildings, transport, AI. You will hear about AI later. But by doing this, we can also take opportunities in the huge number of benefits that we will have from a sustainable net zero energy system. This is issues like cleaner air when we don't have polluting fossil fuels anymore. It's better diets. So thinking about low carbon diets, and I'm not here talking about low carbs in the kind of form of biscuits. I'm here talking about plant-based diets, for example. New jobs, new skills, and also our energy security to make sure that we actually have energy that we use being produced here in the UK, for example, from renewable energy sources. So with that, I will just leave to say that the UK really has a real opportunity here to lead a change that will make our society and the way that we use energy better for all of us, and particularly for our future generations to come.